Hello, welcome to Let Your Life Speak by Parker Palmer. It's only, well, you can see it's not a very long book at all, 113 pages. But I am doing this without any notes, so you never know. We could ramble all over the place or have a lot of splices in here from me making mistakes, but we'll do the best we can. The book is 21 years old. So that means I first read it when I was 36, 37 years old. It came at a pretty significant time in my life to help me with my vocational direction. Because Let Your Life Speak is, like the subtitle says, it's about listening to the voice of vocation. And so this book came at an important time for me, and I've referred to it from time to time. Now 20 years have passed, and it doesn't mean the same to me today as it did then, I don't think. There are some times in the book where he goes into personal stories that don't really advance the ball for me anymore. They don't really, I've never been one who cared much for, telling a story and trying to look into somebody else's life to get their point. That's always been a little bit of a difficulty for me. Secondly, I don't think I necessarily use the same language that he uses about faith in God. Similar, but not the same. And I would even say that from then to now, the way I hear him changes. But there are 8 to 10 quotes or trinkets or moments that you can only find in this book. At least in my life, I've only found in this book. And they, to me, are worth the inspiration. All right? So I figured the best way to deal with this, since we have 3 weeks, is to take chapter 1 and chapter 2 this week, then 2 more chapters the next week, and then the final 2 chapters the next week. All right? So, Parker Palmer. Dr. Palmer is an educator, inspirational speaker, very much a spiritual fellow, Quaker. There's one more thing you need to know about it. Is his faith is in, he was formed as a Quaker. So I'm going to begin with this. Hidden within the word vocation itself, which is rooted in the Latin for voice, vocation does not mean a goal that I pursue. It means a calling that I hear. Vocatio, which is the Latin, means to be called or to hear. In a peculiar way, we terribly misuse the word vocation. We think of vocation like a vocational school where electricians are taught, or beauticians or welders. And we think about sending people to vocational school. And I guess our logic behind that was that if you can use your hands are probably telling you what you're called to do. You understand plumbing. That makes sense to you. So it's your calling. I suspect that's kind of what we meant. But the problem with that is that vocation, a vocatio, a calling, can and should happen to people who are doing all manners of professions, not just people who are welders. We like to think that everybody is called to what they do. But somewhere along the line in life, we got on a career path. That's the language that became more familiar to us, is you were choosing a career. And you see how we even put that sentence together. You are choosing your career. And a vocatio is to hear what you're supposed to do. It is to hear from God what your calling is. It's rather mystical, granted, but it is to hear from God to do something. It is not to choose to do something. It is to hear. He has a great line on page 3 that says, before you tell your life what you intend to do with it, listen for what it intends to do with you. And that's where we get off base at the very beginning of most of our choices, is that we start down paths telling our life what we're going to do with it. The simplest way is to say, our parents, one was a salesman and the other was a school teacher, and so those are the professions we know, so that's the road we're going to head down, because that seems to be the easiest road. We know how to get on that road. Our father can connect us with the salespeople we need to meet. Our mother can show us how to navigate the educational system to get a job. And so there it is. That's the path we took. We didn't listen to our life at all. We told our life what we were going to do with it. We went to the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor tells us, well, the job that's going to be really rocking and rolling in 3 years from now when you finish college is going to be this. So this is what you need to train for. So you train for that. And sure enough, in 4 years or 3 years, you get that kind of job. You're miserable in it, but you get that job for sure, because you trained for it and you got the timing right. But it is you or me telling our life what we're going to do with it, not the other way around, not us listening to our lives. On page 6, he writes, verbalizing is not the only way our lives speak to us. They speak through our actions and reactions, our intuitions and instincts, our feelings, our bodily states of being, perhaps more profoundly than through our words. If we can learn to read our own responses to our own experiences, a text we are writing unconsciously, every day we spend on earth, we will receive the guidance we need to live more authentic lives. In other words, listen to your life. Listen to the things that you feel instinctively. Listen to the things that, the way that you act and react to the way the world is. And that is seemingly, not always, but it seemingly is something that comes sort of natural, all right? But we have to listen to our life. And that's why this is so difficult for us. It's easier to take the guidance of the vocational counselor than to listen to your life. It's easier to go down the path that your mom and dad set down for you than to listen to your life. Listening to your life and listening to your gifts and listening to what you are and who God has made you is difficult. And this brings me to the first passage of Scripture that I think of. All through chapter 1, I can't help but think of John chapter 2. In the second chapter of John, Jesus performs the miracle at the wedding at Cana. He also does some other miraculous things. And by the time we get to the end of chapter 2, verse 22 or 23, somewhere right along in there, the people come to Jesus and say, we want to make you king. Now, how actually they thought they were going to do that with the Romans, I don't know, but they were convinced that they could make Jesus king. And so they're going to try to push Jesus into being king. But Jesus says, no, I know who you are. And better yet, he knew who he was. He said, that's not the path. I'm listening to my life. That's not what he says. Of course, he doesn't say I'm listening to my life, but that's exactly what he's doing. He is saying, that's not my calling. Doing it that way is not my calling. There is another thing that I have to do here. And Jesus listened to the life that God had given him. Now, rightly so, you and I should be saying at this moment, well, we're not the Son of God. And we're not. We are mortals. But we can still listen to our life. Maybe we can't always be in tune as Jesus was, but we can listen to our lives. I was in my 30s, he writes, when I began literally to wake up to the questions about my vocation. By all appearances, things were going well. But the soul does not put much stock in appearances. Seeking a path more purposeful than accumulating wealth, holding power, winning a competition, or securing a career, I had started to understand that it is indeed possible to live a life other than one's own. That's what Jesus would have been saying if he let those people push him into being a king. Right then, right there. You see, it is possible to live someone else's life. Indeed, a lot of people live it. They get encouragement to do this, to do that. We're good at patting each other on the back, affirming people, letting them know that we love what they do. And all along, it may be that the path that we're going down, because we get pats on the back, because we're accumulating some wealth, is not necessarily the sign that we should be going down that path. So what is the sign that we should be going down that path? And if you're out there right now and you've got young children, you're thinking, well, I do want my kids to be able to make it in this world. I don't want them to be poor. Oh, that's all true. And listen, that's not what this is about at all, because in my life, most of the people that I've met that follow their passion, that follow their vocation, that hear that voice, they do fine. They don't lack for food. They don't lack for purpose. They don't lack for having things. Because they've listened to that voice doesn't mean that they become a monk. But it does mean that they don't always walk the appointed path, the path that others wanted them to walk, the path that others thought they should walk. Now, I got a little bit more time and I can move into chapter 2. I don't think I can finish chapter 2. In chapter 2, he tells an old story, but it's actually perfectly fitting for what he's getting at. On page 11, he says, there is a Hasidic tale that reveals with amazing brevity both the universal tendency to want to become someone else and the ultimate importance of becoming oneself. Rabbi Zusa, when he was an old man, said, in the coming world, they will not ask me, why were you not Moses? They will ask me, why were you not Zusa? You see, the temptation before all of us is to emulate or follow someone else. To say that we're going to be them or like them. But God's not going to hold us accountable for why we're not Moses. That's what Zusa is saying. God's going to hold Zusa accountable for why he was not the best Zusa. Why he did not live fully into what God had created him to be. So, there is this point where Parker is wanting us to do the hard work of truly thinking about how we are gifted and special and unique, and that God has formed us in a certain way to do something. Now, I've got about a minute left, and so this is a little bit off the books, and we're going to have to start with chapter 2 when I come back next week. But vocation is the way we make a living, okay? Not everybody can be fortunate enough to find in their voice a way to make a living. So there is another word called avocation. Avocation is a voice that you hear and a calling that you follow that may not pay the bills. In other words, you may be a banker by trade. Or you may be a teacher by trade. Or you may be, a physician by trade. But your avocation, the calling that you hear, is clear and you take the time to do it, but you have to do it and it doesn't make you the money that you live off of. But an avocation is just as much as hearing this voice. It is recognizing that God is speaking to you and giving you giftedness to do something. In my own life, I've been fortunate enough that the job that I do is my vocation. It is my calling. It is the vocatio that I heard, the voice. But another way in which I've lived out my vocation is that I've enjoyed coaching basketball and coaching sports. And I find a lot of fulfillment in doing that. Now, I don't make a living at it, but it's an avocation that I live out this same calling from God. So we've got to begin the hard work of listening to our lives. So I invite you this week to start listening to your life. I know it's going to sound funny and it's going to sound awkward. I don't care if you make a list of your gifts or a list of the things that you like, or if you just think in your head about these things, or you try to create some diagram where you sort of have a central focus of what you're supposed to be doing and you pull things into that. I don't care how you do it. Just take some time to truly think about your calling, your giftedness, the way God wants to use you. And we'll pick up here next week.